that, I'm going to turn it over to our guest speaker. He is Bryan Holder. He's an attorney. He ran for Congress this last time on the Libertarian Party ticket. So I asked him, since we've dealt with Democrats and Republicans, I asked him if he'd come and talk to us about the Libertarian Party. Because I know from what I've seen nationally, and I forget the two national candidates now who ran.
Gary Johnson was the
Yes.
presidential candidate, former
Yes.
Republican governor of New Mexico, and then Bill Weld was the vice presidential candidate, and he'd been the former governor of Massachusetts, Republican governor. So
Correct.
they sort of
So-
came from the Republican side to the Libertarian Party.
Kind of like you did. You migrated over to the Libertarian Party. So, and they were both, I remember during the campaign, they both said that they were extremely LGBT friendly. So I thought, knowing that, I thought I would ask Bryan to come talk to us about the Libertarian Party and what they stand for, so we could kind of learn about that party as well. So Bryan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for inviting me to speak here today. So, my name's Bryan Jack Holder. I've lived in Council Bluffs most of my life. I grew up out in Crescent, so I'm just an Iowa guy. Been here my whole life, but I got involved in politics about 4 years ago, just as sort of an activist. The NSA recording all of our phone conversations, text messages, they're in our computers and everything. I just felt, I'm not an attorney, unfortunately, like Mike said, but I do have a law degree from Creighton. But the Fourth Amendment requires that the government obtain some evidence before it starts snooping around in our lives, and they've got to get a warrant. So they've been violating this portion of the Bill of Rights for decades. This just didn't start under President Obama, and it'll continue on. That's sort of the way our government works. But when I was younger, and 18, I registered with the Democratic Party. Most of my family are working class Democrats, and I voted for Bill Clinton back in '92. So I probably would have voted for Perot just as sort of a protest vote, but I voted for Bill, and we had a great time during the '90s. It was a prosperous time for this country. You know, the internet was finally created and made accessible to most of us, and you think about how much that development has changed all of our lives. A lot of us for the good, but then there's also some detriments that we get from that. So the Republican Party, I started going to Central Committee meetings just to participate in the party politics, because if you don't participate in party politics, if you're just an average citizen, your voice is really only heard on election day. And I found that, you know, I have certain things I care about. As a libertarian, it's not just a party, but it's a political philosophy. And there are two basic principles that us as libertarians hold ourselves to. And the first one is that we have the right to self-ownership, that, you know, our life is ours, our liberty is ours, and our property is ours. And the second principle is that it's morally wrong to initiate force against another person. So we call this the non-aggression principle. Now, we still have the right to defend ourselves and our loved ones, but it's morally wrong to initiate force. And as we know from our civics classes growing up, government is force because our government, we're all paying taxes to it. We're subject to the laws and the regulations. But from what I've found through being involved in party politics is it raises your elevation a little bit more. But what can really make a change in the world is if you guys ever decide to run for office. I decided to do that because I preferred to do that instead of arguing with my elected officials at some of these town hall meetings. I go to them as a citizen journalist and record it for the community to create a record. But, you know, I never want to have to yell at our congressman who I've run in the campaign with twice now. I went to a town hall he had in February up in Des Moines, and it was sort of sad that people were talking over him and yelling and waving signs. And waving signs is great, and clapping and stuff is good, but it's not good to interrupt people, because those in power, they don't like it when we question their authority, and they automatically get into defensive mode. Now, David handled it very well, but I've seen some politicians that they would shut the meeting off right away, and that's it. And I believe, as a libertarian, that our civic duty is to participate in this political process. So, you know, we all need to talk with our friends and neighbors about whatever issues that you feel are important to you in your life. And if the people that we've elected, and maybe you didn't vote for them, but the majority did, if they're not advocating for things that you care about, it's your right to get your name on the ballot and to run for office. So to run for Congress in our congressional district, you need about 400 signatures to run as a Libertarian or to run as an independent. Now, if you decide to run for Congress to go to Washington in one of the two major parties, you're going to need thousands of signatures just to get your name on the ballot. And the parties, if you're just an average citizen like we are, they may not let you debate the major money candidates that the party supports. So the Libertarian Party is not like that. We welcome everyone that wants to come and discuss the great issues of our time, because we all have a vested interest in what's going on in our country right now and where it's going for future generations. I see a little one there, and I'm going to have to leave in a little bit here. My son has his 18th birthday party today, but you know, I see that our government typically gets us involved in wars around the world when the economy gets bad like it is now. It happened before World War I, and it happened before World War II. And I worry about possibly having a war with Russia or China someday. And you know, we can't afford to have a conventional war with those countries because of their population size. And it would go nuclear, and we all know from our study of history in the Cold War that, you know, there wouldn't be much life left here on Earth worth living if we had a nuclear war. So my son, I don't want his generation drafted to go overseas to fight some country that doesn't take half of all of our paychecks, that doesn't spy on us. So when I decided to run for Congress a couple of years ago, I did a little bit of research because, as all of us know, before you apply for a job, you want to learn as much about that job as possible so that you know what the job entails. And what I found is there's an amendment from the founding of the country that was never ratified by the initial states. You know, we've all heard about the Bill of Rights. Well, this should have been the original very first amendment. And it would have limited the size of our congressional district here to 50,000 people, and every other district in the country. Now, the district we live in today has 750,000 people in it. So if you decided to run for Congress like me, and if you were ever elected, you'd be responsible for making decisions for 750,000 of us. And I feel that that's way too much responsibility to put on one person's shoulders. The reason the founders wrote this amendment was to limit these districts to small constituencies so that your representative would be as close to you as possible, and you could talk to them every day, give them your input. You know, if I was ever elected in an alternate universe, I would set it up so all of us here in this room and every citizen that can vote on election day could vote every day on every bill before the Congress. That way, your representative is not above us. He doesn't have more political power than us. And, you know, I think he should count our vote. The only stipulation is I would make your vote public, just like my vote as your representative would be public. So I would want people to list their name, their address, their phone number, and an email. But you'd have as much power as I would have, and we could all be sort of like Thomas Jefferson every day if you wanted to say yes or no to the bills before Congress. But our government, the way it works now, it's this way, and it's sort of a corporate form of organization. So our congressman becomes sort of a CEO, and he's got a paid staff of 18 people. And if you've ever tried to call in to ask for help on an issue, sometimes they can get you a resolution that you agree with, but oftentimes it's difficult. So I've run for Congress twice now. I make my own signs. I don't have any campaign manager, and I don't take campaign contributions. That way, I'm free to talk about whatever I feel like I want to talk about and discuss any issue with people. So, but I think that more of us need to get involved, and I'd like to see more of us run for Congress. One other thing I'll say about our state legislature. When the state of Iowa was founded in 1846, our state representatives only represented about 800 people, and the state senators only represented about 2,000 people. Well, now our state representatives, like Marianne Hanusa, she represents about 30,000 Iowans. So it went from less than 1,000 to 30,000. And these elected officials are under a lot of pressure because most of them haven't thought of things like I have to count everyone's vote and make sure everyone's equal. You know, they get elected and then they make decisions for the rest of us, and oftentimes we don't agree with that. So I know your community has struggled with the same-sex marriage issue for years, and I think, is it the 8th anniversary of the opinion from the...
Yeah, about 2009, so yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, and I read that opinion, and Iowa has always sort of been on the leading edge when it comes to liberty and justice for all of us. So I believe Iowa was the first state that allowed an African-American woman to practice law. And there's some other firsts too, especially with the school. You know, African-Americans were allowed in schools with the Caucasian kids. So it's just unfortunate that both of the major political parties sort of use these wedge issues to divide and conquer people. You know, they want one group of people angry at the other, because that way they can sort of manipulate us and hurt us into this group or the other. So, like I said, I've been a member of both the major parties, but I've decided to join the Libertarian Party to give people just another viewpoint and another perspective on things. So, does anyone have any questions for me?
Are there currently any libertarians in the Iowa House or Senate?
No, there are not. There's no libertarians in the United States House of Representatives or in the U.S. Senate. There is a state senator in Nebraska, in Lincoln, that she was a Republican and was elected as a Republican, but she changed her party affiliation last year because she wasn't happy with Trump being the nominee of the party. So, yeah, there's a lot of that. There are some libertarians elected at lower levels of government. A week ago, we had our state convention in Des Moines, and there's a city council member in Cedar Falls, Iowa, that's a Libertarian Party member. So,
if each congressional district was 50,000 people, how large would the House of Representatives be?
yeah, that's a great question. It would be somewhere around 6,000 members. So, now, right now, each congressman, since they get a paid staff of 18 people, you multiply 18 by 435, and there's actually about 8,000 people that are representing us. So, and I propose that if this amendment was ratified, that we stay here in our home districts. We all don't go to Washington, D.C. We stay in our home districts. We go to the library every day, and we have our own, what I call, Liberty Congress here, and let the people in Council Bluffs decide on the issues that are going on in Washington. So, you know, my grandmother and parents are both on Social Security, and I don't want that program to go away for them. But I'm 44 years old, and I've looked at the financials of this, and I realize that at some point, when it's time for me to retire, they're going to have to raise the age of it, or the money that I'll be paid is going to be so devalued by hyperinflation, the way that our government creates money out of thin air with our Federal Reserve System. And so I just want to have a conversation about that. But there's all these government programs that they do a lot of good for people, but then there's other citizens that don't benefit from them or have to pay for it in the form of taxes, and that just gets people frustrated. So there's a quote I've got on my phone here from George Washington, and it was in his farewell address. And he said that political parties are likely to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government. So that's sort of the situation we have now with these two parties, that they've become so powerful that the Libertarian Party candidate for president, who had gotten on every ballot in the United States and all 50 states, he was not allowed on the debate stage with the Secretary Clinton and now President Trump. And there was another candidate, Jill Stein, of the Green Party, that most people have heard of. And she was on enough ballots in enough states that she could have gotten enough electoral college votes to become elected president. So it's tough when you sort of stifle any, I don't call it dissent, it's the loyal opposition. So, you know, I love this country. That's why I do what I do now, and I don't get paid anything for being an advocate for the Libertarian Party or for liberty and justice for all. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, why does the Libertarian Party always seem to put these recycled Republicans in the presidential ticket?
I'll explain that. They some of them think they actually have a chance to win, and if they leave the Republican Party, you know, they may be more liberty-minded Republicans where they don't subscribe to all of the conservative social agenda. And, you know, Gary, I don't know if he would have had a chance to win, but I think he would have made it interesting, just like Perot did in '92 when he was in the debates. So, but the Republicans, the reason I would say too that they tend to go from Republican to Libertarian is that, you know, the whole limited government thing, a government of enumerated powers, that people just sort of see that the government's grown so large that most of us rely on some government program just to live our everyday lives. You know, they want us on Social Security, they want us on Medicare and Medicaid and Obamacare, because it gives them in office more power over the rest of us. Because we have to go to town hall meetings, we have to beg them, don't repeal this law, don't enact that law. And as a libertarian, we just want to have a conversation about, do we want to enact this law or that law? What are the intended and unintended consequences of every law that we pass? So, any other questions? Or
How long has the Libertarian Party been around?
1971 the party was founded. So when the party was initially founded, there was a debate within the libertarian community. Some people call us a sort of a private philosophy club, but there was a debate whether government should even exist or not, just because of the fact that, you know, government uses force. If you don't pay your taxes, eventually they send men with guns to come and get you and haul you before the courts to pay. So I'm not an anarchist in terms of I don't believe we shouldn't have any government. I'm perfectly comfortable with the Constitution and the system that is set up. But what's frustrating is I've run for Congress twice now, and even though I have a law degree and I've been a good citizen, my dad and I have a photography and video business. They had a debate in 2014 at Iowa Western where I went for my first 2 years, and I was not allowed to participate in the debate, and it was broadcast on Iowa Public Television. So, and they did the same thing just last fall. They had another debate at Iowa Western. So, as an American citizen, I think we're all equal in the eyes of the law, and I think that any one of us, whether you're a Libertarian, Republican, Democrat, Independent, if they're having a debate on public television or public radio, and you've qualified for the ballot as a candidate, I think you have the right to discuss the issues with the other candidates. It's just a matter of, you know, how you discuss things. I never question anyone's motives in politics, because that really goes to the core of who we are as a person when someone questions your motives. But it's okay to come up with a different method of trying to solve problems and bring people together. So, when I was little, my dad, I was a shy kid, and I was in 5th grade, and he made me down at gun school on North Broadway. He made me do the speech contest, and I didn't want to do it, but I had to write and memorize about a 5-minute speech, and I was able to do it. It sort of brought me out of my shell, but I got nervous and sweating beforehand. I'll never forget that experience. But he made me do it again in 6th grade, and then I got to junior high down the street at Kern, and I did the speech contest in 7th and 8th grade. And between 8th grade and getting involved in politics 3 years ago, I didn't give public speeches. I didn't do that. But thankfully, my dad being a school principal and a teacher, I got to see him speak to people over the years. And I have a different style than my dad. My dad's more, has more of a command voice than I do as a school principal. So, but I know anyone in this room could get up here and do what I'm doing and talk with people. And so if any of you guys decide you ever want to run for city council or school board or state legislature or Congress, let me know. I'd be happy to tell you what I've experienced, help you out in any way. I've done all this stuff by myself, just through social media, through Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel. Next year, the Libertarian Party will have a primary just like the 2 major parties. So I've got about a year to get 400 signatures to get on the ballot again. And then once I qualify for the ballot, I'm going to invite my fellow citizens to call me. I've got a YouTube channel and I can broadcast live. And that way, people can ask me questions, we can discuss the issues. And I love listening to talk radio, but so many of the talk radio personalities are very abrasive. And if you've ever tried to call in to discuss an issue, you hear some guy yapping his opinion on there, and you call in, and they some of them try to bully you and intimidate you. And it's nervous enough thinking there's tens of thousands of people that are listening on the other end of the radio for what you're saying. So I just want to help people out. So I see where the country's so deeply polarized, and I worry at some point the more radical and revolutionary forces on both sides of the political spectrum are going to clash someday. So if any of you are on Facebook, I see Facebook postings by my friends that supported Secretary Clinton for president that are espousing the same concerns that a lot of people on the right did about President Obama. So I see my friends on the left asking about firearms and prepping and that kind of stuff. And that worries me because I know people on the right have already done that. But the country, one thing that really concerns me is the electrical grid that we have that basically sustains our way of life. It's never been secured against an electromagnetic pulse attack or a solar flare from the sun that could destroy our electrical grid. So there have been studies done, and some have said that in the urban areas, 9 out of 10 of us would not survive for a year because of the lack of food and water and sanitation and medicine and basic services. So I want to make sure that's secured, and other countries can hack our grid through the internet and shut it off. So there's these critical things that are going on in the world, and I don't hear the people that we've elected at the state and federal level adequately addressing my concerns and concerns of others. So
What's your thinking on climate change?
I believe that the stuff we put into the air and the water, the factories, the industrial pollution, that is not good for the environment. But there's also effects from the sun too. There's the whole solar cycle where every few decades we get a different amount of radiation from the sun, and that affects our climate too. So the question we have to ask each other, and our government has been doing some solar radiation mitigation. They're trying to sort of control the amount of sunlight that's reaching the earth to keep it from heating up. But doing that can cause, there's side effects from that too. So as citizens, we want to say, well, what's government doing, and what are we going to have to pay for this program or that program? And then what are the health effects? What are the effects on society? I don't see our elected federal representatives doing this kind of research and scholarship that I think that they should do. As if I would count your vote, I'd sort of represent you, not like an attorney, more like a jury foreman, where we would look at all of the evidence presented by both sides, and we would have to discuss it and try and come to some kind of consensus. So there's a saying in the Libertarian community that there's no such thing as a free lunch. So the way our system is set up, that they take money from us in taxes to pay for the department of this and the department of that. And some of us just want to know how much of our money is being spent, whether it's effective. And then there's departments we don't know. Our government has a whole black budget where they're doing things. That's where the Manhattan Project came from, that people didn't know about that. But then you look at all the advances in science that all these secret programs have bought us. The space program was good for our way of life.
So how polarized do you think the Libertarian Party is? What are the two
There's
extremes?
Yeah, there's people that are new to the party. We're growing very fast, and so there's people that bring whatever political experiences or viewpoints they have from whatever party they were with before. And there's people that are more left libertarians. There's some that are more right. I guess there are some people that I know, they think I'm a liberal if they are a conservative, and then if they are a conservative, they think I'm a liberal because I'm not willing to impose my value system on others. I'm not willing to impose my viewpoint or my worldview. The best I can do is explain how I see things and listen to how you see things, then we talk together about what are some possible ways to address your concerns and mine. So it's more of a collaborative effort, not an adversarial thing. That's part of the problem with lawyers being in government, is they see every issue, every problem in sort of a black and white, left and right, clear cut, and there's a lot of gray area, you know, and that's where liberty is, you know, some people may not think that you have the right to do or act in a certain way, but as long as you're not harming anyone else and what you're doing is agreed to, I don't see where the government has a role in this. So.
Anyone else? Well, Bryan, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you letting me do this. And if anyone wants to contact me, it's Holder for Iowa is my website, and I'm on Facebook. And before I got involved in politics, I had about 200 Facebook friends, and now I've got about 1,300. And sometimes I gain a few, sometimes I lose a few, but my Facebook page, I treat it like an open public forum, so people are free to post news stories or opinion pieces. And I tell people, just be prepared to defend your opinion if somebody wants to have a discussion with you. So, but I try to treat everyone like we're all friends and family, and you know, that I think there's still enough time to turn this ship of state around. I think there's enough time, but it's going to take more of us getting involved, and more of us have to run as candidates, just to let people know that there's more than two opinions on every issue. So, well, thank you guys. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And it's funny, when I get done speaking, I hope they're clapping because they like what I said. But you know, I was a kid in high school playing sports. I'd have sometimes 1,000 people watch my basketball games my senior year, and half of them were cheering for me, and half of them wanted me to choke on a free throw. So, well, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, thank you for inviting me.